Okay, so let's just jump right into this.
Uh-huh.
I am holding a source text with a title that honestly sounds like it belongs in the children's section at the library, or maybe a zoology textbook.
Right, yeah.
It's called Dance with the Elephant. And my first thought when we started this deep dive was, uh, is this literal? Like, are we talking about peanuts and trunks here?
I mean, it would be a very different kind of deep dive if we were.
Exactly. But as soon as you actually crack the spine, you realize this isn't about animals at all. It is something much, much heavier.
It is heavier for sure, but it's also surprisingly uplifting once you get into it.
Yeah.
When the authors, Dwayne Kuss and Don Calhoun, talk about the elephant,
Mm-hmm.
they're invoking that classic idiom, the elephant in the room.
Right.
But they aren't just talking about, like, an awkward dinner conversation where someone brought up politics. They're talking about the massive, unspoken emotional secrets that Western society in particular tries desperately to ignore.
Yeah. And looking at the material, the biggest elephant of all seems to be death. Or rather, the paralyzing fear of death, trauma, and all those deep, dark skeletons we keep locked in the closet.
Exactly. The central premise here is that most of us spend our lives tiptoeing around that elephant, trying to pretend it's not actively crushing the furniture.
Right. We just pretend the trauma isn't there.
We do. But Kuss and Calhoun argue that if you ignore the elephant, it controls you. It severely limits your choices. So the mission of this deep dive and their entire philosophy is that instead of hiding, we have to learn to dance with it.
Okay, but dancing sounds a bit, I don't know, poetic for something like facing your own mortality or going through a messy divorce. I think most people just want to survive those things, not tango with them.
Hmm.
Is this just semantic framing, or is there an actual method here?
There is a real method, but it definitely requires a fundamental shift in mindset. You see, dancing implies engagement. It implies finding a rhythm. It means you aren't running away, but you also aren't fighting it in a way that just completely destroys you. You are moving with the energy of the trauma to find a new purpose.
All right, I'm listening. So we've got a lot to cover today. We're going to look at what they call the 4 pillars of this philosophy. We're going to break down an actual mathematical formula for life called the cosmic equation.
Which is fascinating, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I was told there would be no math on this show, but here we are. And we're also going to get into the author's personal stories, which are, honestly, they're wild. We're talking about a tale of 2 wives and a guy who spent his life selling tombstones.
It's a really fascinating mix of the philosophical and the deeply, deeply personal. And it starts with a pretty abrasive challenge right out of the gate. The authors state up front that this journey isn't for everyone. In fact, they believe only 1 in 10 people are actually brave enough to really dance with the elephant.
1 in 10? That feels oddly specific. Is that a real measurable statistic or just a gut feeling?
It's basically their observation from decades of working in counseling, administration, and memorial services. They genuinely believe most people prefer the safety of denial. To be that one person, the one who actually faces the elephant, you need a framework. You can't just walk in unprepared. The book calls these the 4 pillars.
Okay, so let's break these pillars down. Because usually when you read self-help or philosophical material, they just list nice words like honesty and integrity and leave it at that. But these guys seem to be building a very specific structure. The list is respect, trust, desire for growth, and confidentiality.
Right, but you have to look at how they define those terms, because it's not the standard dictionary definition. Take confidentiality, for example. Usually we think that just means, don't gossip.
Keep a secret.
Exactly. But here, it's about creating a safe container. Think of it like a cocoon. You cannot dissolve into goo and turn into a butterfly if someone is constantly poking holes in the chrysalis to see what you're doing.
Oh, that's a great image. So confidentiality isn't just about secrecy, it's about protection.
Exactly. It protects the process of transformation.
Mm.
And that links directly to trust. In this framework, you can't dance with the elephant alone. You need a circle of trust, or what they call a COT. But you simply can't have a functional circle of trust if you don't have that protective cocoon first.
That makes a lot of sense. And what about respect? They seem to have a very specific definition for that, too. It's not just like holding the door open for someone or saying please and thank you.
No, it's much deeper than manners.
Yeah.
They define respect as recognizing that we live in a world of binaries.
Yeah.
Good versus bad, black versus white, success versus failure.
Right.
We are totally programmed to judge things instantly based on those binaries.
Like that person is messy or that career decision was stupid.
Precisely. But respect, in this specific framework, means recognizing that everyone creates their own stability. Everyone is fighting their own battle to stay upright in a very chaotic world. So respect means dropping that immediate judgment. You acknowledge that their experience has value to them, even if it completely contradicts your own experience.
Which is incredibly hard to do. It's way easier to just be right.
It is so much easier, which brings us right to the desire for growth. Because if you just want to be right all the time, you stay stagnant. If you actually want to grow, you have to be willing to be wrong, or at least be open to new input. And they use this really beautiful analogy of an apple tree here.
I like this part a lot. It felt very grounding.
It's a perfect metaphor for the seasonality of life. I mean, an apple tree isn't producing fruit 24/7. It has a dormant winter, a budding spring, a harvest fall.
Yeah.
Humans are exactly the same. We have phases where it looks like absolutely nothing is happening. Our winter phase, but that's actually when we're storing energy. And crucially, an apple tree can't pollinate itself.
It needs the bees.
It needs pollinators. In our lives, those are the friends, the mentors, the circle of trust who help us actually bear fruit.
Yeah.
If you isolate yourself, you just wither.
Okay, so we have the structure, we have the pillars, but then they throw in this analogy that I honestly did not expect. They go full Wizard of Oz.
They do. And it's not just a pop culture throwaway either.
I mean, they talk about the Yellow Brick Road and the whole crew, but why? Is it just because it's a recognizable story that everyone knows?
It's because The Wizard of Oz is pretty much the perfect archetype for the journey of self-discovery. Think about the characters. They aren't just random sidekicks to Dorothy. They represent the internal psychological tools you need to face the elephant.
Go on, break that down for us.
So you have the Scarecrow. He thinks he has no brain, but he's actually the problem solver of the group. In this context, you need the intellect to understand the cosmic equation, to rationalize what is happening to you. Then you have the Tin Man. He wants a heart. You need the emotional capacity to actually feel the trauma, not just analyze it from a distance.
And the lion.
The Cowardly Lion. He's looking for courage. And that is arguably the most critical part. It takes immense courage to look at the elephant, whether that's your own mortality, a past failure, whatever, and not run away. The authors are saying, you are Dorothy. The Yellow Brick Road is your life. But you cannot make it to the Emerald City, which is your cosmic legacy, without integrating your brain, your heart, and your courage.
I really, really like that. It completely turns a classic children's movie into a roadmap for therapy. So, nature, the apple tree, gives us the cycle. The Oz story gives us the psychological tools. But the authors argue there's actually a physics to this, right? Like a universal law.
Yes, and this is where we pivot from biology and literature straight into astrophysics. They distinguish between three distinct levels of life. There's the me level, which they call the quantum equation. There's the what will be level, the revelation equation. But for this deep dive, we were really focusing on the middle one, the we level, the cosmic equation.
Okay, lay it on me. I'm ready for the math.
All right, the formula is creative power plus receptive choice plus faith. Take all of that and multiply it by time, and that equals life's cosmic legacy.
Let me just repeat that to make sure I've got it. So it's creative power, receptive choice, and faith added together times time equals legacy. Let's break that down because I see a multiplication sign there, and that usually changes things significantly in an equation.
It changes everything. Let's start with the variables in the parentheses. Creative power is your unique internal spark, and we'll get into exactly what that means in a second. Receptive choice is your relationship with others. That's the we part of the equation. And faith, which they are very careful to clarify isn't necessarily religious faith, is just your trust in the unknown destiny.
And time is the multiplier.
Right. And here is why that matters so much. Imagine that equation. If you have a ton of creative power, but you have zero receptive choice, meaning you isolate yourself, you hate being around people, you don't connect, that zero drags the whole sum down. But time amplifies whatever is inside those parentheses.
So if I'm just full of anger and isolation, and I multiply that by 50 years?
You get a massive negative legacy. You become a bitter person who pushed everyone away. Time makes trauma heavier if you don't process it. But on the flip side, if you have positive creative power and strong receptive relationships, time acts like compound interest. It turns those daily interactions into a profound legacy.
That makes total sense. It's not just adding up days on a calendar, it's amplifying what you do with them. But I really want to double click on creative power because this is where the source material takes a hard turn into star charts and science.
Oh, this is one of the most profound connections in the entire text. They start talking about how stars are actually born. You have these massive clouds of hydrogen and helium fusing together in space. Stars are essentially nuclear furnaces. They spend their entire lifespans creating complex elements like oxygen, carbon, nitrogen.
And then they eventually explode.
Right. When a massive star dies and goes supernova, it blasts all those complex elements out into the universe.
Which creates planets and eventually us.
So wait, are they saying we are literally made of that debris?
Literally. It is not a metaphor. The iron in your blood. It was forged in the center of a dying star. The calcium in your teeth. Supernova remnants. We are recycled stardust. And the authors use this scientific fact to make a huge point about human uniqueness. No two solar systems are exactly alike, just like no two humans are alike. But chemically and energetically, we are all fundamentally connected to the exact same source.
It's that ultimate aha moment. We are unique, but we are also made of the exact same stuff.
Exactly. And that's what creative power is in a human sense. It's that unique stardust spark.
The authors suggest a really practical way to find it, too, if you think you've lost yours along the way. They say, look back at who you were between the ages of 8 and 12.
That is such a specific window of time. Why not high school? Or why not college when you're finding yourself?
Because by high school, you're trying to be cool. You're trying to fit in with your peers. But at 10 years old, you just liked what you liked without any pretense. Maybe it was building massive Lego sets. Maybe it was drawing horses. Maybe it was organizing your bookshelf by color.
For me, it was definitely talking. I was the kid recording fake radio shows on a little cassette player in my bedroom.
See? That's your creative power. For Dwayne Kuss, one of the authors, it was mechanics, taking things apart and figuring out how they work. For Don Calhoun, it was music. That spark is the force that allows you to manifest your destiny. It's the raw material you had before society came along and told you it wasn't a real job or wasn't practical.
I love that. I really do. So we have the theory, we have the stardust connection, but what really drives this concept home for me are the stories. Because these guys aren't just writing from some academic ivory tower. They have been through the ringer. Let's talk about Dwayne Kuss first. His personal elephant was his divorce.
And it wasn't just the standard we drifted apart kind of divorce. Dwayne calls it a tale of two lives. He was married for 12 years, had 2 sons, a very traditional standard setup. And then the elephant walked right into the room. His wife came out of the closet and left him for a woman.
Wow.
Yeah, specifically a teammate on her softball team.
He uses a very visceral phrase in the book to describe the pain of that realization. He calls it a lesbian divorce knife, which I have to say sounds incredibly intense.
It is intense,
Oh.
and we really have to contextualize it for the time. This was years ago, in a much more conservative environment. Dwayne wasn't just heartbroken, he was absolutely terrified. He was worried about his sons being chastised by the community. He felt like his entire reality, his masculinity, his family structure, his standing had just been shattered overnight.
So he was dealing with the trauma of loss, but also the trauma of shame.
Exactly. And he talks about having 16 tons of life experience weighing on him. He went from being a self-described grease monkey to a college administrator. He was constantly changing, constantly seeking something new. Meanwhile, his ex-wife wanted stability. He needed change. It was a fundamental clash of their creative powers.
But the resolution of this story is really where the whole dancing with the elephant concept comes into play, because he didn't stay bitter. He didn't let that knife define him forever.
No, he didn't, and that's the actual work of dancing with it. He analyzes the situation retrospectively. He realizes that his ex-wife's inner spirit, her true creative power, was always connected to women. He stopped taking it as a personal failure of his own and finally saw it as her truth. He also realized his boys were incredibly lucky because they were loved by 2 moms and a dad.
So he reached that we level of the cosmic equation. He fully accepted the reality of the receptive choice.
He did. And then he met Bette. And he uses this beautiful butterfly metaphor to describe what happened next. He says he had to die in the cocoon of that divorce. He had to process that trauma fully to emerge reborn. Bette fed his mind and his spirit, not just the physical. He realized he couldn't have met her, couldn't have been ready for her, if he hadn't danced with the elephant of his divorce first.
That is a seriously powerful pivot. Now let's look at the other author, Don Calhoun. His story is, well, it's literally set in a cemetery.
Yeah, Don is a memorial counselor, which is basically a polite industry way of saying he sells tombstones.
Talk about facing mortality every single day. I mean, most people hold their breath when they just drive past a graveyard. This guy punches a clock there.
And he actually grew up in it. His dad was a monument builder. As a kid, Don really struggled with the family business. He thought, we're making a living off tragedy. This is morbid. But as he matured, he had this profound realization. Death is a gift.
A gift.
Yes, because it anchors the value of living. If we lived forever, nothing would matter because there would be no urgency to do anything. Time wouldn't mean anything.
But even the expert in death gets hit by the elephant eventually. Don shares a story about returning to work after his own brother Bob died suddenly at age 63.
This is a really raw moment where the professional mask completely slips. He's sitting there in his office, totally overwhelmed by his own grief, completely unprepared to help anyone else. And in walks a couple, Chris and Rod. Their son, Miles, who was a high school wrestler, had just died on the mat from a sudden heart defect.
Ooh, that is just devastating.
It is unimaginable. And Don openly admits in the text that he had nothing to give them. He was totally empty. But then the twist happens. Instead of Don counseling them, the professional doing his job, they actually started counseling each other. They became what he calls mutual guiding spirits.
It goes right back to that receptive choice part of the equation we talked about. Even when you are the so-called expert, you have to be receptive to help from others.
Exactly. They shared their immense pain, and in doing so, they honored the legacy of both Bob and Miles. It wasn't about a business transaction anymore. It was about shared humanity. If Don had tried to be the strong professional and kept his walls up, he would have failed them and himself. By being vulnerable, he found a way to dance with the elephant.
Don also connects this back to his own creative power through music. There's this incredible story in the book about an Elton John concert in 1979. And I think this is super important because sometimes creative power sounds like you have to, paint a masterpiece or write a novel, but sometimes it's just about receiving energy.
Correct. This brings in the other side of trauma, the absolute need for escape and recharge. Don was a caregiver for his mother. She had a brain tumor and was entirely blind. He was literally her eyes. That is an immense, crushing burden for a young man to carry every day.
So he takes a night off and goes to see Elton John.
Northrop Auditorium, Minneapolis. 4,800 people packed in. He describes the energy in that room as electric. For a few hours, the music, the rhythm, the shared experience with the crowd lifted the weight of his mother's illness right off his shoulders. That is creative power in action. It's not always about creating art from scratch. It's about experiencing the energy that reconnects you to life. It gave him the strength to go back home and be the caregiver he needed to be.
It's amazing how these personal stories really flesh out that mathematical formula we broke down earlier. You have the trauma, which is the elephant.
Yeah.
You have the creative power, whether it's music or resilience. You have the receptive choice, connecting with grieving parents or a new partner. And when you multiply all that by time, it becomes their legacy.
And notice that their legacy isn't a physical statue. It's not a tombstone, which is highly paradoxical given Don's profession. For Dwayne, his legacy is the authentic relationship he built with his sons and with Beth. For Don, it's those moments of pure connection with grieving families. The cosmic legacy they talk about is intangible. It's pure energy.
So if we pull back and look at the big picture here, Dancing with the Elephant isn't about fixing everything instantly. It's not a magic pill that makes the pain disappear overnight.
Far from it. It's a daily practice. It's about consciously building those 4 pillars: respect, trust, growth, and confidentiality. It's about identifying your creative power, that literal stardust inside you. And it's about having the courage of the lion to face the trauma and say, okay, I see you, you're here, let's figure out the steps to this dance.
And realizing you don't have to dance alone. You need your circle of trust.
Precisely. We are fundamentally social creatures. We are chemically connected to the stars and emotionally connected to each other.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Because we've talked about divorce and sudden death, which are huge life-altering elephants, but surely this philosophy applies to smaller elephants too, right?
Absolutely it does. The elephant in your room could be crippling debt. It could be a career path you absolutely hate but feel stuck in. It could just be a really difficult conversation you're avoiding with your spouse. I would ask you to just pause and think. What is the elephant in your room? What is the secret, the fear, or the trauma that you are tiptoeing around? Because whatever it is, I promise you, it's limiting your choices, it's shrinking your world.
And maybe, just maybe, it's time to put on your dancing shoes.
And here is a final thought for you to chew on today. If we really are all made of stardust, and if this cosmic equation actually holds true, then your legacy isn't something that just happens after you die. It's happening right now. Your legacy is the energy you are exchanging with every single person you meet today. Are you feeding the people around you, or are you just existing alongside them? Because that energy exchange, that is the dance.
Wow. That puts a whole new spin on my next conversation. I've definitely got some thinking to do. Thank you for walking us through this incredible framework, and thank you to you for joining us on this deep dive into Dance with the Elephant. Catch you on the next one.